Production and distribution of City Club forums on IdeaStream are made possible by the generous support of PNC and the Raskin Family Fund, with additional funding from Robert Conrad, Cleveland State University, the Chautauqua Institution, the Cleveland Clinic, and the United Black Fund of Greater Cleveland, Incorporated.
Good afternoon and welcome to the City Club of Cleveland. I'm Dan Malthrop, Chief Executive here, and it is my pleasure to welcome former Ohio Supreme Court Justice and Democratic candidate for governor, the Honorable Bill O'Neil. Mr. O'Neil is here as part of our ongoing effort to put you in conversation with the people who are shaping the future of our state and the people who hope to lead it, specifically those who have named themselves candidates for governor of the state of Ohio. This November, Ohioans will head to the polls to cast votes in races in all 16 congressional seats, 1 Senate seat, the offices of governor, lieutenant governor, attorney general, secretary of state, treasurer, and auditor. And in the past 18 months, we've heard from 4 Republican and 4 Democratic candidates for governor. In addition to Mr. O'Neil today, we will hear from 1 more Democratic Party candidate in a few weeks, former Ohio Congressman Dennis Kucinich. To Mr. O'Neil today, he's a Cleveland Heights native, a U.S. Army veteran, having served in Vietnam, where he earned a Bronze Star and the Army Commendation Medal. He also served in the Ohio National Guard, retiring as Lieutenant Colonel. He's been a pediatric nurse at Hillcrest Hospital. In 1996, Justice O'Neil won a seat on the Ohio 11th District Court of Appeals. He served 2 terms as presiding judge on the court and sat by assignment on the Supreme Court of Ohio. And in 2012, Mr. O'Neil was elected to the Supreme Court of Ohio after making national headlines with his refusal to accept any campaign contributions. He resigned from the Ohio Supreme Court last week on January 26th, turning full-time to his gubernatorial bid. Mr. O'Neil received his J.D. from the Cleveland Marshall College of Law at Cleveland State University, his bachelor's degree in journalism from Ohio University, and his nursing degree from the Huron School of Nursing. Ladies and gentlemen, members and friends of the City Club of Cleveland, please welcome gubernatorial candidate, the Honorable Bill O'Neil.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you, sir.
I wanted to thank Dan for a warm welcome to the City Club. It's not my first appearance here, and it's just always an honor to be here. Good afternoon. My name is Bill O'Neil, and right here in Cleveland, Ohio, at the historic Citadel of Free Speech, the City Club of Cleveland, I have the privilege and honor to deliver my first major address as a candidate for governor of Ohio. I'm truly humbled. You know, I retired as a justice on the Ohio Supreme Court at the end of last week, ending 15 years as a jurist. And I was in my hometown of Chagrin Falls over the weekend, and a man came up to me and he said, "Now that your judge career is over, aren't you sad?" I looked at him and I said, "You know, I've never been asked that question before, but I started out as a dishwasher at Ohio University, and I just finished 5 years on the highest court in the state of Ohio. No, I'm not sad. I am humbled." You know, I'm grateful for the rich opportunities I've enjoyed so far in life, for I have lived what I believe to be a charmed life. But as we all know, there's a time to come and a time to go. I went to Ohio University at a time when a working class family could put 3 kids through college at the same time. 3 weeks after graduating from Ohio University, I was on active duty with the United States Army. I spent a year in Vietnam and was awarded the Bronze Star, came home and retired from the Ohio National Guard with the rank of Lieutenant Colonel. In 2007, Governor Ted Strickland inducted me into the Ohio Veterans Hall of Fame. You know, the Army put me through law school at age 30. I went to nursing school at age 50, and now that I'm 70, I've got to figure out what to do with the rest of my life. You know, I've been a pediatric emergency room nurse and a presiding judge on a court of appeals where I wrote over 1,000 opinions. I've been a single parent and an adoptive parent as well, and now have 4 accomplished children who I love dearly. I've been a commanding officer of an armored cavalry unit and a head coach in a boys' baseball community league. As an assistant attorney general, I've been a civil rights lawyer for the state, and I've had the honor as a small-town lawyer to represent a black teenager wrongfully accused of a crime and marched him out of the courthouse as a free man. And finally, I've been an associate justice on the Supreme Court of Ohio, having been elected in 2012 on the pledge to take no money from nobody. I believe my varied experience has left me with the vision, wisdom, and courage to lead the great state of Ohio. But that leaves us with the most important question of all: why? The Democratic Party has always been the party of ideas, from Social Security, minimum wage and job safety, to overtime and real regulation of the banking industry. But lately, as demonstrated in 2016, we have lapsed into a mentality of not addressing any issues lest we annoy someone. Well, today I'm going to annoy some people and delight some others. It is time to talk about what we stand for. There is an opioid crisis in Ohio, and it is killing people at the alarming rate of 4,000 per year. Or, to put it more directly, before midnight tonight, another 10 to 12 Ohioans, our fellow citizens, will die. As a registered nurse, I have seen this crisis up front and personal. With these hands, I have administered the life-saving drugs that saved a child's life. He began to breathe regularly again. His pulse abandoned its race to the end, and slowly he came back to life. We all know the drill. Ask any policeman or medic, nurse or doctor, and you will hear the frustration and indeed their anger. Criminals are flooding our streets with low-cost heroin, and our children and loved ones are dying. Quite frankly, late last year, I was pulled away from plans of a retirement, surrounded by friends and children and engaging in my favorite pastimes. For I heard the distant but familiar clarion call to duty. As one who has fought for justice and the righting of wrongs for all my life, I simply cannot walk away as if everything is all right, because it is not. It is as if I am walking past an alley and there is a mugging going on, and I simply cannot walk away and pretend it's not my business. The opioid crisis and its web of death must be met head-on, and I have a plan. Once upon a time in Ohio, there was a state government that took the issue of mental health seriously. We had a network of state hospitals that specialized treating the most vulnerable members of our society. It was a place where people with mental health issues could receive first-rate treatment and given hope for the future. But in the 70s, a decision was made to board up all those hospitals, send the patients back to the 88 counties where they had come from. The theory was that back home, they would somehow magically find someone to treat them. And you know where they ended up? In jail. That's where the vast majority of our mentally ill citizens reside today, in jail. And that is an outrage. But wait, it gets worse. Because now a decision has been made to privatize those prisons and bring the concept of profit at $20,000 per prisoner per year into the equation. And if you do not remember anything that I say today, please remember this. The very concept of one citizen imprisoning another citizen for a profit is morally indefensible and totally unacceptable in a civilized society. Unfortunately, I bring you further troubling news. For in those same prisons, you will also find 4,700 nonviolent marijuana-related prisoners being held for the sum of $100 million a year. It is hard to imagine, in my opinion, any defense whatsoever for the concept of housing mentally ill citizens with nonviolent marijuana offenders in a system of for-profit prisons. Surely we can do better than that. And I say to you today, it is time for the state of Ohio to build more hospitals and less prisons. Speaking of hospitals, let's talk for a moment about that tragic opioid epidemic sweeping the nation, with Ohio apparently right up front in the death department. There is no question that the pharmacy industry broke free of its leash, and it did something, of its leash and flooded the market with unnecessary opioids in quantities that simply cannot be justified. And there's no question that organized crime found its way into the supply chain, and we now have between 10 and 12 citizens, many of them children, dying from overdoses. And the death by overdose is usually the end of 3 or more years of family tragedy at homes, jobs, loved ones lost, and the will to live has been lost. Setting aside the cause for a moment, the reality is that if one is lucky enough to make it to the emergency department, there is simply nowhere to send them after you save their life. And I say to you today, until we start treating addiction as the disease it is, this scenario is not going to end. Addiction is not a crime, and it only flourishes in the criminal arena. Addicts need treatment, and I'm not talking about 3 days of detox here. The doctor saves their life, the nurse admonishes them, and they're released to their family to go home and die. There are many solutions to this crisis, but none more urgent than opening the state hospital network we used to have and providing a haven where addicts, mentally ill patients can receive world-class treatment. And I am talking long-term medical interventions to save lives, and it's going to take money. But the question today before us is really very simple. Putting cost aside for a moment, what are we going to do? Are we as a state going to sit idly by, or are we going to show compassion, vision, and leadership as a state? To ask the question is to answer it. So, let's talk money. Real money. Medical solutions. Real medical solutions. And let's mix in the idea of jobs. It is a known scientific fact that alcohol and tobacco kill people. That is a simple, known fact. We tax alcohol and tobacco, and they add to our economy, and they provide constitutionally protected choices for our citizens. Yet there's also ample scientific evidence that marijuana has never killed anyone. Yet we imprison our fellow citizens for its use and possession, and that makes no sense at all. It's time to get honest with ourselves and simply proclaim that regulated marijuana production, possession, and use by adults should be legal in Ohio. In Colorado and Washington, where cannabis is legal, the results of legalization are astounding and good. The reality is that the heroin use, overdose, and deaths are down, law enforcement and prison costs are down, and taxes are way up. My approach to legalization and control of marijuana is simple. If you grow it for personal use, it is not a state issue. If you grow it for sale, we will regulate it and tax it. Make it safe and make it profitable. This simple approach will generate $500 million in sales taxes in the first year. History is on my side, and the reality is that the marijuana juggernaut is coming our way. Let's be the leaders and do it our way, with safety, jobs, and profit as our motives. Legalizing marijuana in Ohio is the right answer, and I support it by whatever means it arrives. It has known medicinal qualities, it reduces the use and abuse of alcohol and drugs, and it is a great job creator. I say legalize marijuana, the sooner the better. Lest I become known as a one-issue candidate, let me share the other planks of what has become known statewide as the O'Neill Plan. We've already discussed legalize marijuana for a revenue of $500 million, release nonviolent marijuana prisoners for a savings of $100 million, and use the $600 million in new revenue to open a world-class state hospital network that protects and heals our most vulnerable citizens. You know, several other planks that you can find in the O'Neill Plan are so simple, I'm amazed that I own the market on ideas this year. Let's talk about the environment and jobs. There is simply no explanation not to mandate made in Ohio solar panels on every government building in Ohio. They pay for themselves in 7 years. They create high-paying jobs for design, construction, and installation. This one's a no-brainer, folks. Solar panels made in Ohio, government buildings. It's a no-brainer. And while we're talking about no-brainers, solar jobs, and the environment, I would propose we support and stimulate the job market by granting a tax break to any homeowner or business that installs made in Ohio solar panels or wind turbines on their property. Think about that. Jobs, environmental protection, lower utility costs for everyone. Who could be against that proposition? You know, the next plank in the O'Neill Plan can start an argument in an empty room. But the time has come to lead the nation, make $15 an hour the minimum wage. A friend of mine who owns 10 restaurants told me that would be the end of sit-down dining in Ohio. To which I responded, Larry, you give the kid washing your dishes for $8 and give him $15 an hour, next Saturday, he will go out and he will buy a Jeep Wrangler built in Toledo. Trust me, I know kids. And you know what? Next Saturday, he will bring his girlfriend in here and buy dinner. He does not care if you have to raise the price of your burgers from $8 to $9 because he cannot afford to eat here today. We have a society today where entry-level workers need to work 2 and 3 jobs to keep a roof over their head. Put money into the hands of the true working class in America, and they will spend it. Guaranteed. Put 2 minimum wage workers at $30,000 a year in a household. They will buy a house, they will start a family, and they will enjoy a slice of the American dream. It's another no-brainer, folks. Speaking of the American dream, let's talk about college. My sisters are here today, Patricia and Mary Kay. And our parents gave us an introduction into the American dream. All 3 of us went to Ohio University at the same time. Took some board jobs, some washing dishes, hardworking parents, and determination, but we made it. Today, Patricia is a family therapist, Mary Kay is a retired college professor, and I'm the black sheep politician in the family. But the contrast to the lack of opportunities to working class families today is alarming. In the 60s, you could buy room, board, and tuition for $1,000 because the state of Ohio showed its support for its kids. Today, that same college is $25,000 a year, and kids are getting out of school with $100,000 in debt. They cannot buy a car, they cannot start a family or own a home. In short, they represent a giant gap in the economy, and that has to stop. As governor, I will, and I repeat, will, work with the legislature and the Board of Regents and demand that the cost of college be reduced by 10% per year for 4 years. I come from state government. There's not an agency in the world that cannot reduce their cost of doing business by 10% a year. We have lost our way in higher education, and I will be the force to bring affordable education back to Ohio. Let me give you a quick mental exercise to demonstrate I'm on the right track. In 1965, a Chevy Impala cost $3,000. I know that. I'm a car guy. That car costs $30,000 today for a multiple of 10. College room, board, and tuition in 1965, as I said, was $1,000. Today, it is $25,000, a multiple of 25. This is just not right, and we're going to change it. You know, speaking of the American dream, 20 years ago, there was a feasibility study that showed a high-speed, 200-mile-an-hour electric train from Cleveland to Cincinnati with stops in major cities was economically viable. Think of that. High-speed rail is done in China, France, Spain, California, yet we can't do it in Ohio? That's nonsense. This is leadership, folks. We had a $600 million high-speed rail grant from the federal government a couple years ago, and Governor Kasich sent it back to the federales. We had, we said no. We had mass transit vision in the 40s. We have somehow gone blind. This is an issue that creates jobs, stimulates the economy, and saves the environment. Yes is the right answer. Lastly, the joy of being a non-justice. Running for governor is I get to say freely what's on my mind. Education's been on my mind for a long time. For over 20 years now, we have been funding and institutionalizing an illegal funding system for schools. It is unconstitutional, it is unfair, and it is cheating many students out of their God-given right to a quality education. Education of our kids and preparing them for the jobs of tomorrow has always been the foundation of our society, and we have lost our way. This week I've seen but a symptom of the disease. When ECOT went under, leaving 12,000 students without anywhere to go, and nearly $100 million in school funds just missing, I believe this problem now has everyone's attention. Educating our children is the most important task we have. And for years, the General Assembly has just dodged the bullet. While I do not approve of untested and unaccountable charters, they are not the problem, although there are surely problems with the charters. Parents are always going to try to find the best school for their kids. The charters for profit bonanza was in part fueled by the failing school systems parents were unwilling to send their children to. But that does not mean we have the right to simply throw money at the problem and not demand accountability. So this gives me an opportunity to brag about my management skills. I sent a committee out near and far to find me a running mate. And here was the criteria: a female educator, something that's been missing for years. A female educator in the governor's office. And today I'm ready to make my first governor's announcement. When elected, there will be a seat created in my cabinet for the Czar of Education, with the full authority of the governor's office to fix this problem once and for all. I present to you the first Czar of Education to be. a Cleveland school teacher who became the principal of the highest performing elementary school in Lorain County, 2 master's degrees, a superintendent's license, and on her way to her doctorate in education. Ladies and gentlemen, my running mate and the next Lieutenant Governor of Ohio, Ms. Chantel Lewis from East Cleveland, Ohio. Come on up here. Come on.
Wow, I feel so tall up here. Thanks, Bill. Once again, my name is Chantel C. Lewis, and I am your next Lieutenant Governor of the state of Ohio. Now, many of you are thinking, who is Chantel C. Lewis? Well, I'm about to tell you. Chantel C. Lewis is a lifelong educator, a proud mother, a graduate of the University of Akron with a Bachelor's of Science in Elementary Education, 2 masters from Cleveland State University, a former member of the Ohio Planning Supervision Commission, former school board member, and the former city council member. And I'm of the belief of this particular quote from Malcolm X. Education is the passport to our future. It's up for us to prepare for it today. Unfortunately, many of our children are not granted this opportunity of an equitable or equal education. Education opportunities must, I'm going to say must, be balanced in school systems such as Cleveland Metropolitan School District, Columbus, Akron, Canton, Lorain, and many, many more. We all know that school funding based upon property taxes was deemed unconstitutional, meaning illegal, for 20 years. 20 years. Making it difficult for districts to pass levies in order to give students the education they deserve and need. Recently, ODE closed its doors to ECOT, displacing 12,000 students. Now, I want you to imagine 12,000 students is equivalent to 1 school district, in which the state overpaid ECOT nearly $100 million. I call this a virtual mess due to this lack of accountability academically and fiscally. Now, I want to give you a statement. People are blaming ECOT, but how can you really blame ECOT? Here's a statement that we say around my school. You cannot blame the child for doing it. Blame yourself if you allow the child to get away with it. Schools like Newark shelled out from its budget $500,000 to ECOT, and the state has not held them accountable. I'm asking you, those rich people out there, give me $60 million, and I would never tell you where it's going. That's what the state did. Now, as I close, the O'Neill Lewis Education Plan will have everyone working collectively to ensure that we have 3 types of insurance. Nationwide insurance, because we need everyone on our side. All-stake insurance, because we need all stakeholders, the educators, the children, the businessmen, mayors, community. And progressive insurance, because we can move forward to a productive and successful educational system. As I close today, education that we're currently doing in the state of Ohio is not education. Education is hope. Education is the future. And most importantly, education is a civil right. Once again, my name is Chantel C. Lewis, and I'm your next Lieutenant Governor of the state of Ohio. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
That's a rough one to follow, so I'm going to close with just one thought that our team, which is assembling, you understand our campaign is only 5 days old because now that I am a candidate. But I was up late last night making my speech, and I just had something that was nagging at me, because I was so proud to have Chantel as my partner, and we're gonna change the state of Ohio. We're gonna address what's wrong. And I looked at the governor's cabinet. I looked at the governor of Ohio's cabinet, and they had shining faces everywhere. And there was people that wanted to represent the insurance industry and the agriculture industry and transportation, and there's like 12 of them. And I looked at the list multiple times, and I said, when this cabinet gets around a big round table and they're fighting over who gets what share of the budget, which is what the cabinet does, there is no one in the governor's cabinet from education. That's going to change in January of 2019. Chantel Lewis will be on my cabinet. I thank you. Do I stay here?
Thank you very much. Today we're enjoying a forum in our Ohio 2018 series, our Ohio 2018 Meet the Candidates series. And our forum today is a forum with Bill O'Neill, former Ohio Supreme Court Justice and Democratic candidate for governor of Ohio. I know there are a number of people shooting video today. I do want to remind you that this is copyrighted by IdeaStream. We ask you to respect that copyright. IdeaStream is our primary media partner. We're about to begin the audience Q&A. We welcome questions from everyone, City Club members, guests, students, and those of you joining us via our radio broadcast, our webcast, or our Facebook Live video. If you'd like to tweet a question, please tweet it at the City Club, and our team will work it into the program. And if you would like to leave a question in the comments section of the Facebook Live video, we will also work it into the program as well. Holding our microphone today is our content coordinator, Bliss Davis. May we have our first question, please?
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for coming. I'm going to give you an opportunity to respond to your critics. Some have questioned your character and your integrity to be the next governor of Ohio because you delayed in resigning from the Ohio Supreme Court after you indicated you intended to run for governor, and also because of that infamous Facebook post which you deleted. So my question is, how do you respond to those critics who say you do not have the character or integrity to be governor, and also specifically to Richard Cordray, who has called you, quote, a loose cannon, end quote? Thank you.
I cherish that quote from my friend Richard Cordray. I've never been called a loose cannon before. I was not called a loose cannon when I was a lawyer representing the Civil Rights Commission of Ohio, and I was prosecuting sexual harassment cases back before Clarence Thomas. But in response to Richard, he's a good friend of mine, and I did indeed say, when Richard steps in, I'm going to step down. And an unfortunate thing happened on our way to the podium. I called my friend Richard when he said he was going to announce, and I said, Rich, I'm on your side. We've been friends for 20 years. I said, we had a 30-minute conversation, and the first 28 minutes went really well. It was rebonding on old issues. And then I finally said, Rich, if you do not adopt legalization of marijuana this year, you're going to lose. And he says, I'm not adopting that. And I said, okay, let me try it from a different angle. Richard, if you don't adopt opening the state hospitals to treat the opioid victims, you're going to lose. And he says, well, I see that more as a law enforcement issue than a medical issue. And I said, well, we disagree. And I said, my friend, I'm going to tell you to your face, I'll see you at the ballot box. Yeah.
You have an amazing resume, but what I want to ask you is, what about your amazing resume do you think qualifies you to execute these ideas in the governor's office? Sure. And kind of related to that, you know, what you said when you ran for Supreme Court Justice, take no money. How is that going to play out? It's important in a different way in a governor race for the money that you take. So how is that going to play out in a governor race?
Thank you so much. I'm glad I'm here at the City Club, because the last time I was at the City Club, I was with my dear friend Steve LaTourette, the congressman from Northeast Ohio that I went to law school with. I was the only Democrat who had the courage to stand up and vote against him or run against him. And little known, I raised $500,000 in that race. My mission of character is that when I said that no money from nobody, I am saying that the judiciary has to be held to a different standard than the rest of the world. But I fully understand. I'm in a governor's race. I've assembled a team. The team is 5 days old right now. We have 10 members. We're going to raise money, but as far as character issues, never been raised. There's no question. I will answer your question directly. I made an inappropriate Facebook post. The message I was trying to convey was how unfairly Al Franken was being treated. I made a very big mistake talking about consensual sexual encounters with women, and I immediately apologized to it, and the driving force behind that was my 2 daughters and my 2 sisters, who said, "You're wrong, apologize, do it publicly." And I come from the school of thought that when you're wrong, you promptly admit it, and I've done that.
Governor,
Nice try.
I'm working on it. Mike DeWine, who's running for governor during the last several years, was known to fly into communities with a state helicopter and shut down what he called pain mill clinics that were run by physicians prescribing pain medication to people who worked in the mines and in various factory environments. And he called these doctors drug dealers and drove them out of the state. It seems right afterwards, we ended up with a huge opioid crisis as people were no longer able to get prescription medications for their pain. They now went to the streets to get it. Would you do anything to assure those doctors involved in prescribing pain medications to people that they do have an opportunity to have a practice here and that they're going to be welcomed here as long as they're not selling drugs?
Sure. Thank you. That's a really nice question because it brings a warm spot to my heart because I'm looking forward to running against Mike DeWine. This is going to be fun. I'm a Supreme Court Justice. He's the Attorney General of Ohio. I'll gladly put my record on the table against him. But more importantly, what's different between Mike DeWine and myself is I'm a jurist and I speak with precision. It's nice to grab a headline with a helicopter and paint a doctor as a bad guy. But the reality is there are pain medicines that I know as a nurse that bring profound relief to patients. So to be painting all pharmacists and all doctors as bad guys is fundamentally wrong. There is no question pharmaceuticals, as I said, got off their leash and we've had way too many pain pills in Ohio. But that doesn't mean you villainize the good, hardworking pharmacists and doctors who are doing a good job. And that's why I think that's the difference between myself and Mike DeWine. He'll paint with a broad brush. I will tell you, as I did today, with precision, what's the problem? What are we going to do about it?
I'm going to ask a question inspired by the left wing of the Democratic Party.
Wow.
Mr. Sanders, Bernie Sanders, the senator, has a lot of fans. And
And I'm one of them.
Well, he's talked about, you talked about making college more affordable. He's talking about free college for all, and he's talking about free health care for all. Yeah. And I was wondering what you thought about those ideas and how close you would come to supporting them.
I am what I consider to be a true Democrat. I was a Bernie Sanders supporter in the primary of 2016, and when he lost, I was a Hillary Clinton supporter. I gave her time, I gave her money. I've always wanted to have the opportunity to at least clarify what I think Bernie was trying to say. Free college is a very bad idea. As I say, my 2 sisters and I went through Ohio University when the state thought it was important to help us at an affordable rate. The example I'll give you is the kid senior in high school right now who wants to go to Ohio State and he gets admitted. And the kid who never did homework a day in his life, who doesn't even have a C average, he gets to go to the state university as well for free. That demeans the quality of education. It diminishes the quality of our students. I think college, anymore, community college is the equivalent of yesterday's high school. So I'm all for community colleges should be free and they should be integrated into the school system. For example, I have I have twins, Sean and Katie, in their senior year at Chagrin Falls High School. Katie was in college, and Sean was at Auburn Tech becoming an auto mechanic. So I believe that community college, junior college, should be free. But I think that a four-year degree should be earned, and it should be paid for, and it should be reasonable. And that's why when I say the cost has to come down 10% per year, I am saying that by the end of my administration, room, board, and tuition at a state university should be in the neighborhood of $10,000 to $12,000, which would comport with inflation from 1965 when I was there. I'm telling you, this state has abandoned higher education, and the kids coming out $100,000 in debt, it breaks your heart, but it also stalls the economy. It's got to be fixed.
Your Honor, I wanted to give you a chance to circle back to Leslie Unger's question earlier,
Yes.
because I think there was a piece of it that I'm pretty sure you wanted to address. She complimented your exemplary record and resume and asked...
I heard that part.
Yeah, I know you did. But she asked about that, what in your resume and in your experience will prepare you to execute on the ideas that you presented, the series of, quote, no-brainers that you presented before. And you addressed the other parts of her question, but I wanted to give you a chance to address that part.
Thank you. And I'm sorry if I missed the less glowing part, but the idea is that as a Supreme Court justice for 5 years and as a Court of Appeals judge for 10 years before that, and by the way, my senior law clerk, Richard Dana, is sitting to your right there, I noticed, and nodding his head dutifully. But the reality is I've ruled on everything under the sun in the last 15 years, from adoption to zoning, you know, from shoplifting to regulation of state agencies. Interestingly, those of you that follow me in the newspapers know that when I announced for governor, I said there was 99 cases to be decided, and they're just hammering them out in Columbus right now. And most recently, I find myself on the side of big business in energy regulation. I just decided a case along those lines because I did on the facts as I saw them. So I think being a judge, being a small-town lawyer, being an Army officer, I'm ready. I can lead the state. I'm ready.
Justice, Governor, Ohio is the #1 state, not just for heroin. We're the #1 state that college-educated students are leaving this state. They get their educations. They can't pay for them. They can't afford them in Ohio. What can we do to turn this economy around in Ohio where college students don't have to be handed charity for their college education, but can in fact pay for their college education the first 6 months after they graduate? Thank you.
Thank you. And that's a great challenge for any government, but particularly you really have to go back to the issue of there has to be a reason for the kids to stay here. And that means that we have to have vision. We have to have vision to create high-tech jobs. And that's what I'm talking about is, you know, why aren't we the solar capital of the world right now? We can do that just by showing some emphasis. Why don't we have high-speed rail so you can go from Cleveland to Columbus to Cincinnati in an hour? Why don't we have that? Why aren't we legalizing marijuana, which, as I understand it, expands into thousands of jobs in areas that we don't even know about. Everybody knows that medical marijuana is a good idea. Well, guess what? The way the state is managing that right now, I don't know if we'll see that in our lifetime. I really don't. You know, because the lobbyists and the interest groups are slowing that down. So we have to have a government, as Chantal has just said, that takes the stakeholders and they bring them to the table and decide, what do we need to do? You know, for example, you know, we need to reform education, but we also have to have new ideas, and the kids will stay. Thank you.
We talked about immigration before the program,
Sure.
but to follow up on that, would you work with organizations like Global Cleveland to see what could be done to reach out and make the state even more immigrant-friendly?
Right. And I don't want to insult anybody's intelligence here, but you know, we're all immigrants here in this room. Unless there's Native Americans, you know, we're all immigrants, and I'm just, as a governor, that's a federal issue, but boy, the states seem to have been awful silent lately. When I was a young lawyer in Geneva, Ohio, I represented the real working class in the fields in Lake County, and so, you know, we had a lot of immigration issues, and most of them were not being handled well, in my opinion. I was asked recently, and you know, what do you think about sanctuary cities in Ohio? And I said, well, let's start with the proposition. There are no sanctuary cities in Ohio, and there should be. But however, you can't just say, as Mike DeWine would say, yes or no on sanctuary cities. Let's talk about the reason there are sanctuary cities. We have people who've lived here for 20 years that are deadly afraid of getting a parking ticket because they have no way to pay the parking ticket without exposing themselves to deportation. And it's an issue, it's a federal issue. We have a congressional body that needs to get off the dime and do their job. But as far as immigration, when I ran for Congress 10 years ago, I had a large following of people because I said there was a lady in Mentor, Ohio, who'd been here for 10 years, and she owned and ran a convenient food mart. And she got picked up by the federal government. She was sitting in the Solon jail. Her 3 children and her husband were hopeless to do anything. And I formed a committee called This Ain't Right. This just ain't right. And you know, we're doing that today. We're doing that today. And as the governor, I would hope that I could marshal forces, get together with other governors and say, stop it.
Thank you for your comments. Thank you for your comments specifically about the opioid crisis. Mentioned a lot about the reopening or expansion of state beds. Just curious if you have any plans as to how we pay for those.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. By the way, people have been quoting me about reopening because that's a hot issue right now. Trust me, I was a union organizer in the 70s. I was up in the attics of those buildings at 3 o'clock in the morning signing up union workers. Those were scary places. Now they have been boarded up. I don't realistically think we'll ever reopen you know, Hawthornden or CPI or Massillon State. I just don't think we're going to do that. But I, for example, have an overly active imagination, and the other day drove past an abandoned Ramada Inn. Looked like it was about 10 stories, and I was sitting there thinking, if I had $600 million to spend every year from my marijuana legalization, I would just why don't we just keep it simple? Let's divide the state into 10 regions. Let's build 10 brand new hospitals. What a bonanza for construction jobs that would be. And I'm looking at 10 stories. You know, you could have detox on the first floor and not so good on the second floor, and just moving on up, because we're not going to solve the opioid crisis by 3-day detoxes. It's just not going to happen, because people will say thank you for the boost and they'll go back to their old ways. We may have to keep them for 1, 2, 3 months. I don't know. In my plan, and it's certainly not a formalized plan yet, but if I had 10 hospitals and I was spending $600 million because I really cared about the victims, I think we could make some real progress there, because I think we could probably treat 500 to 1,000 patients per hospital. If we could get 10,000 people undercover in a real hospital, we'd be making some real progress in saving lives. And I don't know why that is not the top priority for the state of Ohio today. I think we're done. That's good.
Thank you, sir.
Riley, okay, thank you. Whoa.
Today at the City Club, we've been enjoying a forum in our Ohio 2018 Meet the Candidates series, a conversation with Bill O'Neill, former Ohio Supreme Court Justice, now Democratic candidate for governor of Ohio. Our community partner today is the League of Women Voters. We welcome guests at tables hosted by friends of Bill O'Neill, and we also welcome students from the Flow Homeschool Co-op. Student participation in City Club forums is provided by many foundations, including the William M. Weiss Foundation. We thank all of you for being here today. That brings us to the end of our program. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Your Honor. Our forum is now adjourned.
For information on upcoming speakers or for podcasts of the City Club, go to cityclub.org.
Production and distribution of City Club forums on IdeaStream are made possible by the generous support of PNC and the Raskin Family Fund, with additional funding from Robert Conrad, Cleveland State University, the Chautauqua Institution, the Cleveland Clinic, and the United Black Fund of Greater Cleveland Incorporated.